Hey everyone, I'm Lisa Campion, and this is the Miracle of Healing. So glad that you're here with us today. Because today we're diving into the beautiful, deep, and transformative wisdom of yoga. Not just the postures and breath work that we know, but the ancient soulful teachings that really help us heal the mind, heal the heart, and can even change our sense of ourself in a pretty powerful way. Today, my guest is Reema Datta, and she's an internationally celebrated yogi, Ayurveda teacher, and has been immersed in the wisdom of the Vedas since childhood. She learned yoga and Ayurveda from her mother, her grandmother's, her grandfather, who was a renowned scholar of Vedic philosophy. She's very accomplished. So she went on to learn a master's degree from London School of Economics. She's worked for the United Nations and ultimately followed her soul's calling to share the deeper path of yoga with the world. She is taught in over 20 countries across 5 continents and has some pretty celebrity clients like Sting, Paul, Simon, and Edie Brickell. And today she's here to talk about her new and beautiful book, The Yogi's Way: Transform Your Mind, Health, and Reality, which is sort of based on this 12-week course for emotional and spiritual healing. And it's grounded in the sacred teachings of yoga and enriched with science and modern tools. So, we're going to talk about how practicing yoga can sometimes bring up difficult emotions but also awaken our unique gifts. So welcome to the show, Reem. I'm so glad we're going to talk about this today.
Yeah, all my favorite subjects. Thank you for having me.
So tell us how you came to be here. It seemed like you've had a really fascinating spiritual journey that's taken you in a lot of different roads. How did you start in this path?
I feel really lucky because I was born into a family of yogis. So growing up, I was just surrounded by many practices of yoga, everything except asana, to be honest, everything except the
Wow.
physical practice. So I grew up with mantra, the healing sounds that come
Mhm.
from yoga. My mom is a singer, and so she's been singing mantra since I was, born. And
Wow.
Um, and then the philosophy, all the wisdom teachings I heard from my grandparents and my parents, reading texts since childhood or hearing the teachings. And Ayurveda is a part of yoga as well. They go
Mhm.
together, Ayurveda and yoga. So I grew up with the Ayurvedic nutrition, some of the principles of healing through Ayurveda. So I was exposed to the many practices of yoga since childhood, and I kind of took it for granted. It was just around me. So in college and grad school, I studied international affairs, and like you mentioned, worked for the United Nations in New York City for a while, and I was there when 9/11 happened, and that
Oh.
really shifted things for me. During that time, it was such a tragedy for all of us, and I just really went back to the wisdom teachings of yoga, and this one particular teaching hit home to me, which is that peace really has to begin within ourselves. And
Mhm.
and I was working at the UN and surrounded, all my friends were there, the World Bank, and just so in that world of international affairs and creating peace in our surroundings. And and that one teaching, I just couldn't shake it, that each of us individuals really have to cultivate like a sincere and lasting experience of peace, like not just something fleeting that you feel like 5 minutes after a yoga class, but something much more profound. And I knew that the yoga wisdom teachings and practices, the ancient practices, can help us cultivate that kind of peace, but I didn't see it um, in my surroundings, like in the yoga scenes that I was tapping into in New York. I didn't get a sense that that level, like that depth of yoga, was being shared and experienced.
Right.
And I felt like let me bring that, let me go back to these
Mm.
teachings and study more with my grandparents and other teachers, and help myself and others cultivate like a really deep sense of inner peace.
That's so beautiful, and I love the sort of the back end of yoga, which most Westerners don't really know about. Like, we know, like, think of it as gym yoga, like what we do in the gym, and it's more, um, you know, athletic based, or we're doing power yoga. We maybe there's like 2 minutes of shavasana at the end. It's
Right.
not a like a meditative practice, or many. I think people don't even know there's more
Mhm.
to the whole story, that it is this very complete system, um, that is, ancient and really impacts us like on all the levels of our being.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Mm,
Yeah, so it's been, that even when I started going to yoga classes, I didn't until I lived in New York actually. So I was in my early 20s, and when I walked into yoga studios, I mean, I personally enjoyed the physical. I enjoy asana and movement. So I was like, wow, these dynamic classes, of movement. I enjoyed it. But at the same time I could see how much was missing.
mhm.
And over the years it's been such a win-win for me, because from my Western teachers, I have learned, like I have strengthened my body and have felt that dynamic, that when your body is really strong, it does affect your mind, that your mind becomes
Yeah.
strong too, and you become more courageous and brave. And in the same breath, I felt, honored that I had all these windows of opportunities to share the practices and the teachings
Yeah.
of yoga that relate to the mind and consciousness. It's been a
Mm.
beautiful win-win for me.
Yeah, it's maybe the best of both, right?
Totally.
Is that what you're offering in your book, The Yogi's Way, sort of the best of both of these worlds?
Yeah, yeah. I've felt like privileged in a way, that like my entire life I've had one foot in India and one in the Western world. And growing up, we went back to India a lot, and I lived there briefly as a child and as an adult. So I've in this like privileged position that I've been able to experience the best of two very different worlds. And so in the book, I was like, let me bridge some of these gaps,
Mhm.
and there is movement and breath work I share in the book, but I'm leaning more on the teachings I learned from my family and from my teachers in India, which are all about the mind and consciousness. And the original teachings of yoga really focus on those aspects of ourselves.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of filling in, like, maybe, like, if somebody who has a solid footing in our Western, the asana-based yoga, the way that we do it here, it sounds like your book sort of fills in some of the missing pieces that maybe they're ready to broaden and deepen, um into these deeper parts. And I think, like, I loved how you talk about, the true self, and that
Mhm.
yoga is sort of as a practice of connecting. Yoga means union, right? So connecting deeper with our physical bodies, our emotional body, our spiritual body, our mental body, our and with God, with our divine self. So can you
Mhm.
talk a little bit about how yoga can be this path back to our true self?
Yes, I find that yoga has been mistranslated in most of the world, as because I often see yoga as translated as union of mind, body, and
Mhm.
spirit.
Yeah.
But when I read the original text, it's very clear that yoga means union with our true self. And in
Mm.
other words, for true self, our consciousness. And
Wow.
consciousness is like our innermost being, the
Mm.
deepest, most powerful part of ourselves. And there's a beautiful metaphor in the ancient Sanskrit text. They'll say like the mind is like the sea, and the surfaces of the mind are like the surfaces of the sea, these waves that are constantly moving and changing. And then at the very depths of the sea, there's like the stillness and quietness and vastness. And that's consciousness. That's the deepest part of ourselves, is this beautiful stillness and vastness and quietness. And yoga's union with that. That's our
Wow.
soul. At a soul
I love
level,
that.
we all share that this beautiful vastness. And it's powerful to unite with that part of ourselves, because if we can really connect with that stillness and vastness within, at the very center of our being, and really like rest our minds there, not just for a moment, but for longer and longer amounts of time, then like that rest and that concentration becomes very powerful. And like dormant energies within us start to stir. And those
Mm,
energies can be creative energies or they can be healing energies. So if we can rest in that quietness at our center, then over time, over with practice, we start to experience insight and clarity,
mhm,
and our creative juices start to awaken. And that, like, the whole purpose is to unite with with ourselves at that soul level, not just for our own peace, actually, or for even our own health, but so that we can get in touch with our creative energy. Like,
mhm,
what was my purpose? What was I born here to contribute to the world? And then once we start giving our gifts, that's where the real peace, starts. And then the path becomes one of not like discovering our unique gifts and then cultivating them, refining them, updating them, even if we know what they are. There's always room for refinement and just giving them. And
mm.
that's where like the contentment and the peace and the satisfaction come from. It's all in the giving. And so it's such a beautiful path. So I would say that yoga is union with consciousness, our true self, our innermost being, for all of those reasons.
I love that so much. And in my all my time working as a psychic, the single most frequent question that people ask me is, "What is my purpose? What am I
Wow.
here for? What are my gifts?"
Yeah.
And I just love what you said about like when we tap into that vastness, the quietness of our own being, those gifts become revealed,
Yeah.
to us in that quiet space. And I think that's what everybody is really longing for.
I think so too. And we have this tendency to search for happiness outside of ourselves, right? Like,
Yeah.
when I get that job or that relationship, then I'll be happy and at peace. But it's just this beautiful, like, turning around. The ancient
Mm,
texts, they say only few are wise enough to turn their gaze inwards.
right.
And and I think that's true, and I think it's difficult because we have so many distractions these days. We just have to look at our iPhone and we're just like blasted into this outer
Oof,
world that's
yeah.
just infinite. And so it's harder and harder to really turn our gaze inwards, but
Mm.
it is possible. And yeah, just awakening those dormant energies and discovering and nurturing our gifts. I really believe that is the path to peace. Mm.
Love that. And when I started yoga, I don't know, it was in the '80s or maybe back in the '70s. Like, it was a really long
Yeah,
time ago.
wow.
And
Uh-huh.
I
Yeah.
know, I remember, like, crying in class. Like, I would get
Mm.
to class and I would cry, or like, all these emotions would come up and everybody was giving me, like, looks and everything, and it took me a while to find a teacher who was like, "You just get brownie points if you cry in yoga class," and,
Yeah.
that was the teacher for me, and you talk a lot in your book about how sometimes when they do these practices, these uncomfortable feelings arise or feelings that we haven't had time to process come up, and that's normal and actually what we want to have happen. Can you talk a little bit about that process?
Yeah, definitely. So, of course, like, when we start to get quiet, things start to surface, and sometimes those are uncomfortable emotions like anger, or even like attachment to things we start to become aware of, jealousy, anxiety, fear. And in the ancient texts, these challenging emotions are called kleshas. And
Mm,
klesha literally translates to a mind poison or a destructive emotion. And the teaching is that when these types of emotions arise, our mind is powerful. So,
mm,
and the definition of mind is the storehouse of thoughts and emotions. So our
mm,
thoughts and emotions are powerful, and they're powerful in the sense that they can uplift us and they can lead us to our greatest potential, but they're also powerful in the sense that they can destroy us. So there's this
mm,
recognition in the ancient texts that our mind and these thoughts and emotions, they can be our greatest friend or they can be our greatest enemy. So
mm,
how do we approach like these kind of difficult thoughts around anger, attachment, fear, jealousy, isolation. How do we approach them in a way that we can like heal and uplift ourselves instead of those emotions draining our energy and bringing us down? And so those are a lot of the teachings that I brought into this book because I found that they were missing in the yoga world today. And I
Yeah.
find them so useful, you know, especially now so many of us are struggling in our minds.
Mm.
And it's like the rates of anxiety and depression. It's so sad to see, like amongst adults, amongst children, just how they're skyrocketing. So
Mhm.
I found like I've needed those practices for myself, you know, those ancient practices and teachings on how to navigate these kinds of difficult emotions. And they've helped me in
Right.
moments of struggle. So a lot of the focus of the book is that how do we approach these emotions and heal and uplift ourselves?
And you really have a complete process here. So it's like a 12 step or 12 pillars of
Mhm.
the process. Can you talk a little bit about, and this is, I know this is what you're doing in your course,
Sure.
in your 12-week course. So can you talk a little bit about what that process is?
Yes. So I introduced four foundations to the path, the yogi's way. And the four foundations, one is motivation. And that's really important and is often overlooked, but it's so juicy, you know, to because often we come to yoga because, you know, we want to experience peace or we want to experience a healthy body and mind. And so that's understandable and that's totally okay. But the invitation is just to broaden that motivation. Like, I want to
Mhm.
experience peace and health so that I have more energy and wisdom to give. You know,
Right.
that just to have that bigger motivation that I'm in this practice, I'm on this path, so I have more to ultimately, so I have more to give, I have more to contribute
Mm.
to the world. So getting firm in that kind of motivation. And then stories is the next one, which is recognizing that the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves really have a big impact on our lives and how our lives unfold. And so looking at the ways we define ourselves and rewriting our narrative in an empowering way. And then the other one is choices, which is recognizing that in every moment we have a choice of what to think, what to say, what to do, what to choose. And so there are many practices on how we can gain awareness of what choices are we making that are hurting ourselves and others, and what choices can we make that help ourselves and others. And the
Mm.
fourth foundation is nourishment, which is like engaging in movement and breath work and a holistic practice to really stay grounded and healthy and have that foundation to discover our gifts and nurture them. And that leads into the 12 pillars, which is like, this is like the holistic practice of yoga that you know, I find missing in today's world. That's
Mhm.
so focused on the physical. So the 12 pillars are, one is the mitra, which is a Sanskrit word that means a friend. But it's a very special kind of friend. It's like a type of friend that saves you from yourself. You know,
Mm.
that can see, because oftentimes our friends can see in us what we can't see, right?
Yeah.
So a mitra is the type of friend who's going to help you see how are you, what are the choices you're making or the thoughts, the actions, the words you're using that are holding you back, that are hurting you or others, and to help you see, recognize those things. And then
It's
you
like a
do the same.
mirror. It's like a
Yeah,
mirror,
it's a
right?
mirror.
It's yeah.
Yes, and then you do the same for your mitra. So the spiritual path doesn't become something that's all about you, but as you're learning and growing, you're helping someone else and they're helping you. So it's this beautiful collaboration.
Mm.
So the first pillar is mitra, like have at least one or two mitras that you're journeying with. And then there's breath, like to really understand how you can expand your energy through breath work. And then there's movement, but the movement is like mostly about the energetic body. How do we move in a way to loosen blocks in the energetic body, which will
Yeah.
ultimately affect the physical body?
Yeah.
Some of the other pillars are nutrition, communication, learning some practices on being able to be honest, with compassion. And mantra is a big practice, learning affirmations that help you on your path. Um, a service is one of the 12 pillars. So it was really like about creating a holistic practice. And
Right.
the main reason is because, in the ancient texts, they say that these blocks in the body and mind, they're called granthis in Sanskrit. And granthis are very specifically defined as very difficult knots to untie. And the granthis, they form through our thoughts, through our emotions, through the food we eat, the type of actions, movement we do. So to really loosen those knots, it's almost like you have to have a holistic practice. You have to be looking at
Yeah.
your thoughts and your breath and your body and your nutrition and your communication, like all these things that can either create knots or loosen them. And
Mm,
so the
beautiful.
12 pillars are really to support that process. And in a bigger picture, the ancient texts make it very clear that the purpose of all these yoga practices are to loosen the knots in the body and the mind so that each of us can connect to consciousness directly. And just like that just opens the pathways for that sweet, direct connection that we can
Mm.
cultivate.
So fascinating. And my hippie parents took me to transcendental meditation when I was 10. And
Wow.
I and and they were kind of devotees of Yogananda. So
Okay. Yeah.
I grew up with Kriya yoga is something that was
Great.
around. And
Mhm.
and I know Yogananda always says like that yoga, he had kind of his own yogic practices, was really designed to smooth out the energy meridians and open the chakras and
Yes.
open the body so that we could sit in meditation. Like,
Yes.
that it was preparatory for meditation, and that, it makes me think about the gym yoga where we do, 50 minutes or an hour of exercise for 2 minutes of shavasana, when really, what I hear you saying, it's the other way around. Maybe all these practices are to unwind the knots, whether they're energetic, emotional, mental, all of them, so that
Mm.
we can go into that vast space, that quiet space that you were talking about. Is
Yes.
there a meditation practice as part of your package
Yes.
here?
Yeah,
Yeah.
there are actually 3 meditations in the book, over the 12 weeks. So the first is a simple breath meditation, and then we go into it. The third one is a consciousness meditation, where you're
Mm,
really getting a feeling for that dimension of spaciousness within yourself, and first getting familiar with it, and then being able to sit in it for more and more minutes. You know?
beautiful. I love that. So, let's talk a little bit about your 12-week class, because I know that's coming up in September, and that you're offering, it's an online class. Can you tell us a little bit about what that's like?
Sure. Yes. So it's a 12-week. So the book is 12 chapters, and it's designed to you spend 1 week with each chapter because each chapter is filled with practices. I
Mm,
definitely didn't want to write a book just on yogic wisdom. I wanted to be something that people could immediately apply to their lives and their practices. So, but there's like a lot, a lot of practices in each chapter. And the very first assignment in week 1 is to find your mitras, to have at least
mm,
like 3 is a really powerful number. So I recommend like having yourself and 2 friends to go through the book with. But then it's nice to be part of a larger community. And a big part of the path and how yoga was transmitted, thousands of years ago. It was always in the space of a community setting where you had your
mm,
mitras and your larger community. So there was always like these opportunities to share your experiences and like
mm,
ask your questions and discuss what happened in your practices and what does this mean, and I had this breakthrough or this breakdown or this challenge. And so there's a lot of communication and support, and that's like, I share one of my teachers in this book. He talks about the power of practicing in community. And he had this visual, like he took a pencil, he gave a teaching, and he took a pencil and he said, "This is the power of practicing by yourself." And with ease, he just broke the pencil in half. And then he took a wad of pencils and he says, "This is the power practicing in community." And he tried with all his strength, but he could not, break those pencils. And that's why I'm offering this course, but to really cultivate a community where we're going through these practices together and we have each
Nice.
other's support and we have those outlets to ask our questions and to process our experiences.
I love
So
that.
yeah, so we'll meet once a week online to go through each chapter, and then I'll also break you up in groups of mitras that you have your mitras to connect with throughout the week.
Nice.
Yeah.
I think that we all long for community, spiritual community, meaningful community so much right now. So important.
Yes, yeah.
Mhm.
So, and I wanted to offer it online just to open it up to people who, might not live near me, that we can still connect and go through the journey together.
Beautiful. And Rima, if people wanted to connect with you, how do they find you?
So you can find me on reemayoga.com and all my offerings. I have online offerings and in person. So, you can find me there and connect with me there.
Are you still practicing in New York? Is that where your studio is?
No, I've actually moved to New Mexico. So I live in Taos,
Oh,
New Mexico,
yeah.
and I will be offering retreats here and some trainings here. So I feel like this place really called to me because all that, spaciousness of our souls, it's like I just have to look
Mhm.
out the window and it's like this vast blue sky and this quiet town, and it's a special place. So I love
I love
teaching
that.
here and living here.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for writing this incredible book and for bringing your wisdom, today to our podcast and also to the world. I mean, it's really, I think the work you're doing is really beautiful, and you can find her book, Rima's book, The Yogi's Way: Transform Your Mind, Health, and Reality. I assume Rima, you can, and anywhere books are sold, people can get that. Yes.
Yes, and there's also an audio version of the book. It's in my voice, and if anyone
Oh,
prefers audio,
lovely.
then you can
Yeah.
also get that. Yeah.
I love that. Your voice is is so beautiful to listen to, so I would definitely, I'm gonna get it on audio just so I can hear your voice again.
Thank you.
Aw. And thank you for being here, Rima, and thanks all of you guys for, tuning in to this incredible conversation we're having. If you're looking for me, you can find me at lisacampion.com. I work mostly with psychics, healers, and empaths who are wanting to step even more fully into their gifts, because my mission in life is to create an army of healers to go out there and save the planet. That's what I'm all about. So, thank you for joining us today, where we are healing the planet one person at a time, right here on Empower TV.